Well, greetings and welcome to another episode of Lightbulb Moments. We're glad you're with us today, whether you are joining us live, which is most every other Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time, or listen to the podcast or viewing us on YouTube. We're glad you're with us today. A shout out to Lightheart Sanders, who has been a legacy sponsor of Lightbulb Moments since the very beginning. And as it relates to the beginning, we are over 6 years now, and I don't know how many episodes, JP, maybe 230, something like that. Anyway, maybe you'll put it in the chat. So today's episode, which we'll get to in a moment, is a very important episode, and I am so excited about this topic. So excited about the guests. But before I get there, let me talk about the last episode. Last episode of Lightbulb Moments that we did really addressed compensation, and in particular, some bold claims about the future of pay changing in the professional beauty industry, claims about uncapped commissions, 70% commission rates, et cetera. And so I really unpacked my point of view on compensation. Haven't been involved in compensation projects, haven't been a salon owner myself, et cetera. I've gotten a lot of comments about that. A lot of people have shared it. So you might want to check that episode out, which was our last episode 2 weeks ago. Maybe JP will put it in the chat so you can check it. That's a special episode. I think you're going to want to listen to that one if you haven't already. But that's not what we're talking about today. We are talking about a book, Trade Up. All right. Look at that book. Okay. And I have special guests, Jason Altmire and Riley Burr, who let's bring both of you to the off mute and on camera. And let's get started here. Well, good morning. It's nice to see both of you.
Good morning. Good
Morning,
to see
Tom. Thanks for having us.
So these aren't just everyday guests. I've had the opportunity to work with both Jason and Riley, and that's been an absolute delight. And they are part of CECU, which stands for Career Education Colleges and Universities, of which CUNY is a big supporter of. In fact, Aaron just did a breakout at a conference that you just hosted. And so you're doing really, really good work with CECU. But just for a quick minute, maybe why don't one of you describe just in a couple sentences what CECU is? Riley, I'm going to go to you on that one, okay?
So, CECU is the national association representing post-secondary trade schools, private career colleges. And so we work with a lot of these 2-year and certificate institutions, and they're doing really, really wonderful work. They work with a lot of underserved populations, whether that's low income, Pell Grants, first generation. We have students with children of their own. And so we're giving them sort of a second chance at their post-secondary education, a lot of allied health, cosmetology, skilled trades. We run the gamut of offerings at our programs.
Awesome. Yes. It's a great organization, and we're thrilled to be part of it and thrilled to be members, sponsors, all that kind of stuff. I talked to Erin about it earlier today, and she was super excited and jealous that I get to have time with both of you. So you wrote a book. You got day jobs, both of you, with senior positions. Jason, you're actually, is it considered the president then of CECU?
I am considered that, yes.
Well, more than considered. Okay. And then Riley, your title?
Couple of roles. I am the Vice President of Policy and Research at CECU, but I also run our research foundation. So I'm the Executive Director of our research foundation.
Now, we had the opportunity to work together relatively closely on a project by the CUNY Institute, where we actually were involved in a project related to nursing. And we had our, 2 researchers that we work with very closely from the University of Texas. It was much more in their wheelhouse than mine, but we did have the opportunity, and it got to really see how the two of you work, and super impressed with how you do everything. You're professional. You're thoughtful. So awesome. Good work.
Thank you.
The book. How did you find time to write the book?
The issue of workforce shortages is in the news every single day. It obviously affects our members and the employers that work with the schools that are our members. And Riley, of course, with our research foundation, is crunching numbers and thinking and putting out reports on this issue all the time. And at some point, about a year and a half ago, we decided, we really ought to write a book on this because no one has put it all together. You hear about college students who are afraid of AI, unable to find jobs. At the same time, employers are unable to find qualified workers to fill the demand that exists across many professions. And you wonder, how can both of those things be true at the same time? And then the role that our schools, the trade schools and career colleges play in expanding that pipeline and filling the gap. And we felt like we had a voice and a lot to offer. So the book covers not just those issues, but Riley wrote a great chapter on international comparisons, what other countries are doing, on Gen Z and the younger generation and what they're thinking about, and why the careers in the trades are a more acceptable path for them than it was stigmatized in the past for previous generations. And we get into what it's like to go to a trade school, what is the experience like, what fields would be appropriate. We want it to be used by guidance counselors and teachers. We talk about funding, where the apprenticeships and on-the-job training fits into all of this. So we really tried to cover everything in one source, which we didn't think anybody had done before. And I think the book does a pretty good job of that.
The book does an excellent job of it. The book is really should be the required reading of so many different subsets of the population. And it's super impressive. It's very well thought out. It can get a little bit technical here and there, which it should get technical because it's backed by data and statistics. And so it's no surprise that you've had so many people get behind this. And some of your endorsements and what have you. And then I had the opportunity to get through most of the book. I also, this morning, I was listening to the episode that you did with Mike Rowe, which I sent to JP by text earlier today. So JP, make sure you put in the chat, not only a link to get the book on Amazon, but also listen to the Mike Rowe episode, which is, we probably could spend an equivalent amount of time that you spent with Mike, which is about an hour and a half, but we got 45 minutes. So I'm going to keep things moving. Okay. So the general thesis of the book is about a skills gap. And I'm going to read a few things that are not in my words. So here's a paradox. Okay. We have a record number of college graduates who cannot find jobs, and a record number of vacancies in high demand professionals, and employers can't find workers to fill the job. That is a pretty strong statement. Also record number of graduates of college in fields, working in fields have nothing to do with their majors. And a lot of people that have incurred a lot of debt to go to a traditional four-year school, and it hasn't led them to a meaningful career. So, and we'll try to keep the cadence back and forth with us, going. But just on that particular point, Riley, I'm going to go over to you since we go back and forth. Make sure we have equal time by both of you. Do you want to piggyback on that paradox?
Absolutely. So, what we're seeing right now is the product of decades and decades and decades of everyone saying that the bachelor's degree is the path to success. So, people have been promised for years that if you graduate high school and you go get your four-year degree, then you will get a great white-collar job. You'll be able to have a house by the time you're 30, and then you'll retire by the time you're 65. Everything has been laid out perfectly, but the problem is we told everyone to get a bachelor's degree. And so you have a couple issues with that. First of all, not everyone wants to get a bachelor's degree. That is a specific skill set that is really valuable in the workplace. It's not the only skill set, though. And so we're trying to pigeonhole people into this bachelor's degree when that might not be what they're good at and what they want to do. They might be great at something else, but they've been told that's kind of a second class job. That's not what you should be doing. So we've told everyone to go this path. And so now we have all these bachelor's degrees, and we are having a really hard time filling the jobs that we told everyone weren't good enough for decades. And now people are kind of coming around and they're realizing these jobs are more than good enough. They can give you flexibility, they can give you autonomy, you can own your own business. There's a great way to enter into these skilled trade careers or cosmetology or allied health. And you don't have to do a bachelor's degree. You don't have to go into potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And so, what we're trying to do with this book is bring those together a little bit and show that a lot of the preferences of Gen Z as they're going into the workforce are really aligned with these careers that don't need a bachelor's degree and don't need all that time and money invested.
Let's stay with Gen Z, but I'm going to make a comment. So you're really talking about a stigma, and it's a stigma that we've seen again and again and again, and we certainly see it in the professional beauty industry. It's very real. But in terms of you're dealing with a larger part of the ecosystem than just cosmetology and aesthetics, but that stigma is absolutely a reality. And it's a really big shame because of the opportunity that exists in cosmetology and aesthetics, massage, et cetera. Now, you also get into electricians and plumbing and all of that and HVAC. But I'm going to stay with you a little longer here, Riley, and tell me what the tool belt generation means.
So we did not coin that term ourselves, but we did love the term that it was used originally. And so the tool belt generation is this up and coming Gen Z generation where they have been sort of given this reputation of they don't want to work. But in this book, we try really hard to reject the idea that they don't want to work. They don't want to work just for the sake of work. They want purpose and meaning in their life. And so there, a lot of them are finding it in the trade careers. They love being able to work with their hands and see a product at the end of their day. They like being able to work with people. But more than anything, they're prioritizing flexibility. I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that they were in high school and college during COVID. And so they were doing their school online and they could kind of just put a lot of other time into their hobbies and what they wanted to do. So they got this taste of flexibility and they love it. And so a lot of these trade careers we're seeing are aligned with the preferences for autonomy, flexibility, and finding purpose. I think just to speak to cosmetology a little bit, something like 88% of people view a salon visit as therapeutic. And so the joy that you get from providing that therapeutic experience, that's purpose. You get to go home at the end of the day and say, I made someone feel better and I gave them a great haircut.
Mm. Jason, I'm going to come over to you. So Jason is a humble guy. He was a 3-term congressman from Pennsylvania. And, you've written other books. And but in your interview with Mike Rowe, there were so many sound bites on that I had to just stop. I mean, some of the sound bites, here's a sound bite. And I don't know if this was from you or Mike, but trades are considered a vocational consolation prize. Wow.
Yeah, we had a whole conversation about that issue. And it's in part what Riley just said, that we've dissuaded people from going into the trades or pursuing higher education, anything less than a 4-year degree, to the extent that if you choose a different path, it appears that you were relegated to that. You couldn't hack it in college, so therefore you went into the trades. And luckily, that stigma is easing now, but there's a huge population in the country, as Riley just said, that are interested in the trades. And social media has played a huge role in this. And, Tom, you and Aaron are so good at social media. You understand telling the story of student success, just what you're doing each day, even at the school, but once you're out in the workforce and the excitement that they feel and the pride and the passion that you can see in their faces, they get hundreds of thousands of followers. And you see it not just in the beauty and wellness industry, but in welding. If you look at Instagram, we talked about this on the Micro podcast, that of the top 50 Instagram accounts that focus on welding, 32 of those accounts are run by women, even
Wow.
though women are only 5% of welders in the country. So it shows there's a huge untapped market, but there's an excitement among the younger generation to get into the trades, and they finally feel like it's not the lesser path. They're not relegated to it because they couldn't go to college. They're choosing the trades as their first choice.
Yeah, there's a lot of areas that I can have a personal connection to, which, depending on how time gets to it, will cover it. But uh, I, something that came out of this is it's twice as likely to own a business if you pursue a trade versus higher education. Wow.
That's what the research has shown. It's actually 20% to 11%. So I guess not exactly twice as low, but very close to, you have double the chance that if you get a degree from a trade school, you're going to be an entrepreneur, you're going to be your own boss, you're going to run your own business, compared to a 10% chance if you go to a four-year university. And you know very well the beauty and wellness industry, a lot of people who go into those roles, especially cosmetology, they want to own their own shop.
Yeah.
So teaching them entrepreneurial skills, teaching them customer service, the soft skills of how to relate to people and advertise and market your services when you're out in the workforce and you own your own business, that's an important part of the curriculum. So when you limit the hours, for example, as some states do for certification, those are unfortunately the first things that go away because schools have to make difficult choices. And when you have a student population that is predisposed to success in entrepreneurial pursuits, that's something we should encourage, not move away from.
Yeah, yeah. That's an area that I feel like I want to unpack more, but I'm going to keep moving on here in terms of the skills gap and some really interesting things to come out of the book. And one of them is you talked about being a national security issue. Now, drop the mic on that one. Who wants to tackle that one? I mean, Riley, it's your turn, but I know Jason, you speak to that too. So, I mean, national security issue? Someone help me on that one.
Well, Riley can talk, but I'll just say that wasn't just us saying that. When we referenced that, that was because the CEO of Palantir, the CEO of BlackRock, it was a discussion topic at Davos for the World Economic Forum. And we were referencing the fact that people now see America's international competitiveness as tied to our ability to keep up with the rest of the world in funding these projects: data centers, semiconductor manufacturing, shipbuilding, energy infrastructure, transportation, roads, bridges, locks and dams, airports. The commercial inventory of the country, more than half of it was built before 1990. I just saw, as we record this now today in the news, that there's more than $2 trillion of infrastructure improvements that have been funded by groups like Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase and other financial institutions. You can only do that if you have the workers to do it. And if we want to keep up as Americans against the rest of the world, we have to be able to do that. So that's why it is considered a national security concern.
And it made total sense, but who would have even connected those dots? So a lot of the jobs right now going into the future, talk about these AI centers and, the need for electricians. By the way, I have worked as an electrician and a plumber, not trained, but I built pools, and I was the guy that helped the guy that did all the electrician and plumbing and all of that. So I've got some stories for you, which maybe we'll get to a little bit in the future. But let's talk about jobs of the future, because, for our listeners today, I'm encouraging our listeners to not only look at through the lens of cosmetology and the different fields that we happen to be in, but also as parents and where you want to steer your kids. I'll tell you where I'm steering grandchildren. I'm steering them to the trades, and I've been saying that for years. but jobs of the future. Riley, you want to tackle that one?
Absolutely. So when we looked at jobs that were most likely to be replaced by AI, they're almost all white collar jobs. And those have high task replacement because AI, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever you use, can swoop in and they can transcribe a meeting very easily, whereas you used to need someone to do that for you. And so they can step in for a lot of those administrative tasks. And when all of a sudden you had five people doing a job, you might now only need one person to run the AI that does the job of those five people. But when you look at the jobs with the lowest task replacement percentages, it's all trade careers because you need people to be responding real time and working with their hands and really doing this. And I think a lot of people have expressed concerns about, well, can robots jump in and do the job of AI? And I had a conversation with someone who they had done graduate studies in robotics, and it made me feel so much better because they said robots are a lot harder to make and specialize than people think they are. So that is not coming for the trades quite as fast as AI is coming for the white collar jobs. And I think that as we transition into this age of AI, not only are these jobs not being replaced, but as you said, we need them for the data centers. I think OpenAI said at one point that they could use a third of the country's skilled trade or electricians just for their company alone. That's just one company that's doing their data centers, and we have so many more that need to be constructed. And so you need a lot of workers to build up these data centers, and you need a lot of workers to maintain the data centers.
When you were on with Mike, Jason, I think it was you that referenced a robotics manufacturer and some comments made by him. Why don't you share those? I thought that was super interesting.
The name of that company is Hadrian with an H, and it's based in Torrance, California. And their CEO is a guy named Chris Power. And their business model is they make robots to do tasks. And one of the things they specialize in is robotic welding. So they're producing robots that can do welding. And Riley talked in the chapter on international comparisons. Japan has an enormous problem with demographics. Their population is aging so rapidly because they're not producing younger people to keep up. So they don't have a way to fill these workforce gaps. So Japan is leading the way on robotics as well as a way to replace the tasks that people used to do. And at Hadrian, you would think because he's into robotic welding, he would dissuade people from going into welding as a career. But he was asked directly, well, okay, so you're doing robotic welding. What would you recommend to a parent to advise their children of what career path to take? What if they're interested in welding? He said, we still need more welders. We can't finish this fast enough. And the skills gap is so big that we're going to need welders a lot quicker than robots are going to come along. So he said he would recommend to children go into welding if you want to have a productive career.
Yeah, I mean, this is such an important conversation today, just because the narrative out there about AI and it's almost like the need for humans is going away, whereas, there's a silver lining to everything, and the workforce always responds and adapts, and there's always a need. You mentioned international. You just mentioned it, Jason. You mentioned it again because Riley, you were the one that really probably led that chapter. Just spend a couple minutes just talking about international inspiration. You talk about Central Europe, Northern Europe, Singapore, Japan. Give us a quick synopsis of that, please.
And the reason we included all of those different countries and regions of the world is not to say they're doing a better job than us. It's to kind of give us a little solidarity of they're also struggling and here's what they're doing to fix it. Maybe we can try some of it. And so, what was really compelling to me in Central Europe, for example, is vocational education is part of their post-secondary experience.
Mm.
Most students end up doing an apprenticeship. They're doing work-based training, and that's not just for the skilled trades, it's for white-collar jobs as well. But then they are also very well set up to have a career because they've already worked at that company. And so their post-secondary learning is not just about classrooms. it's about making sure that you get that apprenticeship, you get that on the job learning. And then in Northern Europe, we talk a lot about the destigmatization of some of these trade careers. And so with the way that their, income tax works, there's a little bit less income disparity in those countries. And so it's less of a problem if you work in a lower earning field. You are not considered to be in a significantly different tax bracket. You are not looked down upon. And so I found that really inspiring of the person who is on the train next to you could be a welder or it could be a white collar businessman, and they're getting the exact same respect. And I found that to be a really compelling idea is how can we destigmatize things in the United States? And as Jason said, Japan in particular is dealing with this silver tsunami, is what they call it, where you have all of these old people or older generations who are about to retire. Most of them are close to 65, and they don't have the birth rate to replace. And so that's something that we are not immune to in the United States. We have a lot of the baby boomer generation that's about to retire, and we don't have as many young people that are ready to come in and take those skilled trade careers. And so kind of interesting to look at them as inspiration as well.
I love words that come out of people that are so good with words and how they combine with destigmatization. I mean, what a great word. I mean, and that really is a great single word that really, I think, encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about, because we started out talking about the stigma of trades, and appropriate for a lot of our audience, specifically in the trades of beauty and wellness. But what a great word that really encapsulates, I think, the idea. So you guys have a lot of talents. It comes to research, communication, et cetera. I'm so impressed. Jason, quick synopsis on nursing, and why both of you chose nursing to be actually your first chapter. Let's go there for a minute. And by the way, that was the project that we collaborated on. It was that field. So, why devote a full chapter to nursing? Well, that doesn't surprise me, but why, like at the very beginning of the book?
The book is on workforce shortages and the skills gap that we talked about. And there is 190,000 job openings for nurses right now in the country. 10% of the entire nursing workforce is vacant. And it's a huge issue. It's a big issue in states because the regulatory bodies have this disagreement with private and for-profit schools about what their role should be, because they're able to expand capacity and they have the resources and the funding to be able to grow and accept more students, much more so than public universities and community colleges. And as a result, these nursing boards, often which have a heavy organized labor presence on the board, will restrict the growth at private and for-profit schools, even though they have an enormous nursing shortage. So we wanted to talk about that. And the reason it's first, and we open up that chapter with an anecdote about, I was on one of the shows taking calls, a C-SPAN show, and they took a call from a nurse, and she was very offended by the fact that I was, what she said, roping in nursing with electricians and plumbers and HVAC technicians and welders. She thought nursing should be, a more esteemed profession, and she was a master's degree nurse. And we wanted to address the fact that we're not saying one is more important than the other or one is a better or more viable career path. What we're saying is we need everybody. We need all hands on deck. We need nurses, and we need all of those trades. So we started that chapter and talked about, why is this nursing shortage such a problem? What are the consequences in an aging population? And what can we do to solve the problem? And we think that is just as important a topic to have that discussion as a nation as the skilled trades.
Riley, there's a section about women in the trades. And honestly, I didn't get that far in the book yet. And I'm still working my way through it. So unpack that for me, if you would.
Yeah, I think women in the trades is tough because for so long it has been a male-dominated field, and it can be really intimidating for a woman to break into a male-dominated field. You worry about working conditions. Is this going to be too hard on my body? What can I do? And am I going to be accepted in the workplace? Is this going to be comfortable for me? And we're seeing that as more women come into the trades, they really excel in these careers. I think that it's welding in particular, where female welders are considered to be really top of the class because they have such great dexterity and they're so attentive to their work. And that's not to say that men aren't, but it's to say that women are doing a great job. And as they get more involved, there can be a greater community to support. And something that we've seen, I think Jason mentioned this earlier, is with influencers. A lot of women are encouraging other women to join the field. Most of the influencers we see in the skilled trades are women, and they're showing, here's a day in my life, and it's helping other women see that this is something that they can do as well. And I think as much as we can open opportunities for women to go into whatever field they're interested in, the better. I mean, when I was growing up, I loved building. I loved working with my hands. I think I would have, in a different life, been a great candidate to be a welder. I think it would have been a lot of fun for me. But it's not something I was ever encouraged to do because that's just not the path that my parents ever chose for me, and that's not their fault. We do see a lot of statistics where parents are more likely to recommend their own career path to their children. We see so many parents who say that skilled trades are a great option, but then when asked, is it a great option for your child? That percentage goes down quite a lot. They're not so sure for their own child because it's unknown, and particularly for women, it's unknown.
Let's stay with welding. I never really think about welding, and this is the most I've thought about welding. I mean, I used to have to do some welding when I built swimming pools, but a couple things about welding. Welding actually also creates an opportunity for creative expression. People are doing some really cool welding art, but how much can a welder make?
If you look at the professions that are in the skilled trades box, the ones that are at the top where you can make the most money, high wire linemen are at the top because they can make a lot of overtime by going, and because there's some safety issues with that job. You need to be really good and really careful at what you do and be well
Not
trained.
afraid of heights.
And that, yes. And then aviation techs is a close second. And then after that, you get to plumbers, electricians, HVACs, welders. And welders, I'll just give you an example. In Philadelphia, Father Judge High School in 2025 graduated 24 students from their high school welding program. All 24 of them got jobs paying $50,000 a year or more as 18-year-old high school graduates. So that gives you a sense of where you can start. And then once you work your way up and you start working on bridges and doing, bigger work for bigger projects, we have two schools among our membership that train students in underwater welding, which is very interesting to watch. They're hanging upside down and they're, they have this kind of Scooby-Doo. Remember the ancient mariner guy with the helmet that he had? And that's the kind of thing. And they're doing well. I mean, you need to be skilled. It's incredibly difficult work. So you start doing that, you can get into the six figures pretty early in your career.
You have a chapter on calling in the Calvary and, think tanks and influencers. Riley, why don't you summarize that whole topic for us, please?
Well, I actually want to turn it over to Jason. I'll give a quick synopsis, but he did so much research looking at every single group that is diving into this topic. And I think what was really inspiring for me getting to read what he had written in this chapter was this is not something we're writing about it. And I'm happy that we were some of the first to put it all into one book together. But there are people all over the country who are working incredibly hard to close this skills gap. People are paying attention to it. People are talking about it every day. But I don't want to steal Jason's thunder. He did all the research. I want to give him credit on this one.
That chapter is almost 10,000 words, which, for folks who know about writing and books, and that is extraordinarily long chapter for a book. And we actually cut it down. Riley helped me kind of narrow it a little bit. And the reason it's so long is because there are so many groups around the country that are working on it. And we call it calling in the cavalry because that's what we need to do as a country to solve this problem of the skills gap. So we talk about philanthropies, government funding, businesses, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, organizations, nonprofits like Skills USA, Jobs for the Future, these groups that every single day wake up thinking about how they can get more people into the skilled trades. We talk about influencers, people like Mike Rowe, who has created a scholarship program that now gives away $20 million a year to folks pursuing the skilled trades. So when you start looking at the breadth and the number of organizations and people and dollars, it's the brightest minds and the deepest pockets this nation has to offer, all working to solve this problem. It gives you some optimism that we really can make a difference. The demographics are daunting, the aging population and the people coming up below who aren't filling the gaps quite as quickly as we would like, but there's so much attention being paid to it that we felt like we needed to have a chapter on we've talked about what the problem is, and that can be depressing, but there really is a reason to believe that we're going to make progress.
Yeah, well, and books like this help a lot because it's nice to have it all in one spot. And, again, I mean, JP would have already put it in the chat. And, I think supporting this work's really important. By the way, we have a new data magazine coming out called IQ, and we did devote some space in the magazine to your book. We have a picture of the book and all that. So we're big fans of it. So my own journey, as I reflect, so I went to a traditional, Riley, like you, it seems like you went to more of a liberal arts school. I went to a school, I started out very much in liberal arts, but I was paying for my education and, all of that. It was, I paid for everything growing up, big family. And it was midway through, I was a sophomore and I was undecided. And I'm paying all this money for college. So I did something very unusual at the time. I took a semester off and I worked in trades. I had been spent the summers building swimming pools in the Chicago area. And I spent the whole semester and I thought, God. So when I came back to school, I declared a major in my version of a trade, which was accounting. And I really feel that it was very skill-based. So I sort of had half of my college time that was liberal arts, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But it really was going in the workforce that brought me back, and I doubled down. And I think accounting, while it's considered a profession and it's probably in that category, to me, it's a trade. I mean, you're learning a very distinct skill. And I've been very grateful that I've had that trade to serve as a foundation for everything that I do today. So I really, I wish people going to school today had a clearer path towards earnings, because it's really heartbreaking to see all these college graduates like working at Starbucks, or trying to find any job they possibly can. Not that working at Starbucks is bad, but, that's not what they signed up for. We got 39 minutes after the hour, and we got about 5 minutes left here. What do you think is really important for our listeners to hear and understand that maybe we haven't covered yet? I'm going to go first to you, Riley, on that one. What haven't we covered that we should?
The bottom line of the book is there's no one right path. We're not here to say that the bachelor's degree is a bad idea, because you can go get an accounting degree and then you've learned the skills to do the exact job that you're prepared for. But think through what you're doing. I think a lot more young people are taking a year between graduating high school and deciding on a post-secondary pathway. And I think that's amazing. I think that if you're only 18 years old, are you ready to decide what to do with the hundreds of thousands of dollars in 4 years of your life? Maybe not. And I think thinking about the fact that there is no one right path, if you feel particularly inclined to pursue one career and it's maybe not what your parents thought, you can try it anyway. I think look through the cost of the programs, look through the time length of the program, look at the job outcomes, and don't just do a bachelor's degree because you think it's what you're supposed to do.
Jason, you got the floor.
I mentioned Philadelphia earlier, and there's a group there called the Skilled Trades Advisory Council that we partner with. So, we've gotten to know that area, and that's why I know about that Father Judge High School. But another interesting thing is the Philadelphia Steamfitters Union last year got 609 applicants for 85 apprenticeship spots.
Wow.
And we get asked all the time as trade schools that serve disproportionately non-traditional students, people that have gone through a difficult time in their life, single moms, veterans returning to the workforce, people who've been downsized, maybe going through a divorce, lost their job for AI, whatever it might be, moving into a new community, just want to do something different, and they need to be re-educated and retrained in a new specialty. And that's the students that we serve. So people will say, what is the role for trade schools? When you think about those 85 steam fitters that the Philadelphia Union is going to produce, they're going to be good. They're going to be good at what they do. And maybe of those 609 applicants that didn't get in, maybe 30 or 40 or 50 of them will find a spot in the local community college, and they'll get to try being a pipe fitter or an electrician or a welder or whatever. What happens to the other 500? Where are they going to go? Because we need them as a country. We're not just going to cast them aside. That is where our schools come in. And I think that is the message of this book is we really do need all hands on deck, and you need to set aside your ideological perspective on private and for-profit involvement in education, whether it be charter schools or higher education, whatever it might be. There are some in Washington, politicians who don't like landlords now, right? I mean, they don't like any for-profit motive. But there is a key role that our schools are playing, and we do have statistics in there on the percentage of the workforce that private and for-profit schools put disproportionate numbers of people into these high demand fields. So I think that is the takeaway. It is there's a lot of good work being done. Trade schools are a big part of that, and students should have opportunity wherever they are in their life at that moment.
Well, let's talk about both of you for a moment, and the two of you being a dynamic dyad. And I've gotten to know both of you. Jason, I got to meet your wife, Kelly, which was delightful. Riley, you and I have had some offline conversations about data and geeking out on data and all that. And I didn't know that firm, by the way, is in Greenville, South Carolina, where you went to school. We have a conference coming up there in this fall, so I'm super excited to get down there. But I've always been a big fan of, pairs working together for a common goal. In your case, it's writing a book. Talk about that a little bit, about the two of you as a dynamic dyad and how both of you brought something unique and different to create a beautiful work here. So.
I think we both came in with really different perspectives. Jason has a lot of experience in the policy space, obviously 3 terms in Congress. He has a lot more professional experience. And I was able to come in, we're writing a book about Gen Z. I am Gen Z. And it was really, I felt like I was able to bring in a lot more personal experience of being able to see what's happening to my friends and what's happening to our younger siblings and what is the workforce that they are facing. And so I think that having two really different perspectives united with the same goal of promoting the skilled trades and promoting these careers and working on closing the skilled gap was really great. And being able to bounce our chapters back and forth and have different edits and different suggestions, it felt like a really great process.
And Riley is a really good writer. She's a good writer. She's a deep thinker. She's a good speaker, as you've seen today. And we did enjoy going back and forth and kind of talking about what should be in the book, what shouldn't be. And we did have a disagreement on some issues. I'll use as an example, immigration. I did not want to bring immigration into the debate because it's such a hot topic. It clearly affects the pipeline to high demand professions. If we're losing those workers, it makes the problem worse. There's no doubt. I just didn't want to touch it. I felt it was too politically hot, and I didn't want the book to come out and everyone's talking about this political issue rather than the message of the overall book. But Riley insisted that we put this chapter in the book, and she wrote it, and it ended up being one of the things, it was one of the things that was most talked about, but in a positive way, that we were addressing the issue, and it got picked up as an excerpt from the book, and interviews that we did, it continued to come up. So I'm really glad that we put it in there. It was the right thing to do in retrospect, but that just kind of gives you an idea of the back and forth that we had along the way.
There's a lot of research and a lot of thinking. There's also creativity that goes into a book, I've often studied, creativity, and one of my favorite works on creativity is written by Joshua Sank. Oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher it. But anyway, he really defined creativity and collaboration, and identified that, a lot of people talk about creativity and collaboration, but research and everything shows that the greatest creativity actually comes from two people working together, so clearly the book is an example of that. Yeah, this is good stuff. And, when I was thinking about the topic in the field of cosmetology, what else did either of you have to say about the field of cosmetology and the related fields? Is there anything that you think, because it wasn't really discussed in detail in the book, but obviously it was mentioned and what have you, but is there anything related specifically to that before we wrap up?
We
I would
talk
say with
about, go ahead, Riley, you go.
Oh, well, with cosmetology, I think, I talked about Gen Z's preferences of autonomy, and close to 50% of hairdressers and cosmetologists own their own business. They're self-employed, so they have the autonomy. There's a lot of part-time work involved with cosmetology, so they have the flexibility. And so I think it's very aligned with Gen Z preferences. You can usually get your cosmetology certificate in less than 2 years, certainly. So they don't have to commit too much time, too much money, and they get to do exactly what they want to do. So I think that it's very aligned with Gen Z. And as I mentioned, it can be a very therapeutic relationship, which kind of gives a sense of purpose and helps to insulate from AI. So I would say it is, a great career path for Gen Z if that's what they're interested in, just looking at what kind of hours do I want to work? What type of work am I willing to do to be self-employed? I think that's what I would say on cosmetology, because it also does have a projected growth rate of 5% from 2024 to 2034. So it's a growing field.
And
Yeah.
cosmetology is a field of passion. You go into it because you have a passion for the industry and because you're good at it. You have an aptitude and you want to work with people. You want that to be your career. And it's important. Almost everybody in the country has to interact with cosmetologists and barbers at some point during their lives, certainly in their lives, but the daily activities. And when you think about that personal relationship, but you need to be certified to go into that profession. You can't just walk out and say, okay, I'm now a cosmetologist. You have to be educated and trained, and you have to be certified. That is the role that our schools play in the process, helping people who have an affinity for that field get to where they want to be. You can't do it on your own. You need to be certified. So I think that's what policymakers need to think about when they think about, how to regulate the industry and the role that schools play in educating and training people going into that field.
Well, I had a lot of light bulb moments when reading the book and listening to the podcast and getting to know both of you. And it really has helped sort of frame my understanding of not only the trades, but even a greater respect for what we do, and the kind of work that we do, which is we really help with education to help round out going into a trade, specifically financial related education. And then on the other side is once they're out of school, is to be able to work with these entrepreneurs that really had no financial or business training and help kind of boost them up a little bit. It gives me a little more purpose. So thank you. All right. Well, everybody, let's give them a virtual round of applause. If you could give them a little shout out in the chat, and then each of you will be getting your $1 million light bulb as a member of the Brain Trust. So watch for that. I thought, we probably could spend another hour on this subject, and we've actually gone 5 minutes over, but I'm so appreciative of both of you for the work you've done, our partnership. Bravo.
Thank you, Tom. Whose picture is on that $1 million bill? Is that
That
Tom Kuhn? Is that a Tom Kuhn $1 million
No,
bill?
that would be
Oh, the
Statue of
Statue of
Liberty.
Liberty. Okay.
There you go. All right. Well, displayed on your wall up there, prominently next to your book over there, Jason, and then Riley, wherever it fits. Riley, you and I want to have a conversation with you. I'm so anxious to get caught up on a couple different things, and I love learning more about your background too. So we're to have a ton of respect for both of you. Thank you, and we'll see you soon. All right.